First of all, thanks for coming in a rainy afternoon, although that is not so unique in Geneva, is it? I am coming from Madrid, so that makes a big difference. Again, thank you very much for coming and accepting our invitation. I think I will start by introducing myself. I am Susana Malcorra. I work in the United Nations for 12 years. I was the Chief of Staff of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the Chef de Cabinet, as it is used within the system. After that, I went to be the Foreign Minister of Argentina, my country. And in 2016, I ran for the Secretary General position and lost, clearly lost. In 2019, we got together, Helen Clark, Irina Bokova, and I, the three of us who ran for the Secretary General position, and decided that we needed to do something together so that we could show the world that not only we could compete, but we could also work together. And we decided that we were going to work in something that was important for all of us. And we have founded GWF Voices. I see that you all have our latest report on women in multilateralism. We have two principles around which we work. One is the strengthening, the reform, the reinforcement, the review of the international system, thinking about the international system as the UN and beyond, because it's not only the UN, of course. And we do that with a unique perspective, which is through the lens of women. That's what makes us different from many others that work on the multilateral system. And we do it through the lens of women, not only as women victims, as some consider, or as women objects of the United Nations, but as women transformers, change makers. And that's why we pay a lot of attention to the leadership of the United Nations, because we feel that this is a key element of the transformational aspects that the UN could afford to do, particularly in these times. And as part of that, we work in getting information around how many women participate in the system. And that's the report that you have there, the Women in Multilateralism report. That's this year's report. But this is the fifth report that we have produced. We are very proud because we have enlarged the pool of institutions that we trace. We always try to speak based on data, based on evidence. We also have enlarged the type of issues that we follow. We have a report on women in health, another report of women in climate change. And in this particular, we started last year also tracking how member states send their representatives, because often member states talk about equality, about equal participation, but when you look at how many member states have not sent a single permanent representative woman, it's over 70. So there is a lot to be done there. So this is the second year where we published that. We are publishing this year not only the New York, but we are also publishing Geneva and Vienna. And interesting, it shows that Geneva has a much higher, still low in the 30s, but it's much higher than the representation in New York, where the center of power is. That again proves that women often are behind in the power discussions. And this year, of course, we have focused on the Secretary General selection, because this is the year where this will take place, and we have given all the information on the historic data that shows that only in 2016 there were 7 women candidates, one before that, in the round before, but clearly there has been no history of women participating, and of course we try to showcase that. In that context, what we are coming to do in Geneva is on June the 9th, the debate among all candidates. Why is it that we are doing it? Well, you might recall that in 2016, as part of the process, the established formal process, the debate was included. And in fact, we were so many that there were 2 debates because they could not accommodate all of us in one single debate. And the debate was took place in the UN General Assembly Hall, which was a very, very powerful message to tell the world. And Al Jazeera was the one that broadcasted the debate to the world. Well, this time around, member states decided that there was going to be no debate. And again, Helen, Irina, and I, but all our members, by now we are almost 80, thought that this was a missed opportunity. So we have decided to promote the debate, put it in motion. It's going to be here on June the 9th, by the way, in the Ivan Pictet auditorium right behind. And we are organizing it in partnership with the UN Foundation. The 2 of us are working together in this endeavor. But it's going to be a debate that is not going to have our brand, neither ours nor the UN Foundation, because we want this to be neutral, to be very proper. It's going to be the UN Secretary General debate, candidates for UN Secretary General debate. It's going to be a neutral setting. We feel very strongly that this is something that we need to provide as a platform, sort of as our duty as a global public good. We don't want to get any recognition for that. We just want to showcase all candidates together. And hopefully that will happen on June the 9th at 3:00 p.m. here in Geneva. We choose Geneva because we felt that it was time to do it in a different setting than the traditional New York setting. And the Geneva has a different set of issues that surround this headquarters, so it was also good to highlight that. And the debate is going to be moderated by Zainab Badawi. You might recall Zainab. She is a very well-known journalist, has dual nationality, Sudanese and British. She has worked a long time in the BBC, and she has a lot of experience in handling debates. So she's going to be the one who is going to handle this one. And it will be broadcast through Eurovision, and the signal will be made available for anyone in the world that wants to either put it completely in their own broadcast or show it partially in different settings beyond of course, the traditional YouTube and websites, etc. But it's going to be as broadly available as possible. So that's the reason why I'm here, to tell you who we are, but essentially to tell you that we will be here in a little bit over a month's time with something that we believe is very important for the process of selection of the Secretary General. So that's me. That's as far as I will speak. Now the floor is all yours. Yes. If you introduce yourselves and...
AFD.
Okay.
Can you tell us if you received already the agreement of all the 4 candidates?
No, we haven't yet finalized that. We are working with them. We are working on the script because it's important for them to feel comfortable. And now that Zainab has confirmed, we are doing that round on the script to finalize. I will say I feel confident that that will be the case.
Yeah, that was my next question about the formula. How long will it take? What will be...
Well, first of all, we have 4 candidates for now. It is not said that it will be 4 candidates by the time we get to the debate. And of course, any candidate that puts his or her name forward will be invited. If it was to be among 4, our expectation is that it will be 60 minutes with a potential overflow of 10 minutes, depending on how the conversation goes. So but 60 minutes we feel is a reasonable time to set the boundary. We will be flexible, of course. Yes?
Jeremy Lange for Radio France Internationale. You you said that it's going to be a neutral setting,
Mhm.
yet you are pushing for a female SG.
Mm.
So I'd like to know how you're going to end up with this setting and yourself pushing for at least two of your own candidates that are members of the GWL to be the next SG. So how can you handle this?
Well, first of all, there is going to be an independent moderator, as I said, somebody who is recognized for her credentials in doing this type of work. Second, as I just mentioned, we are discussing the script and the setting with all candidates. We as GWL Voices will not participate in the debate, and we are just trying to make a platform available. All of that requires effort and requires somebody to do it. That's why the UN Foundation and us decided to work on this. It doesn't happen magically. That's what we are doing. The infrastructure, the logistics, we have secure funding to bring all candidates to Geneva. I mean, all of that requires work. But we are absolutely, how I'll say, independent of what will happen during the debate, which will be curated by Zainab.
So set aside this part. If you could just elaborate in a nutshell, why are you pushing for a female SG for the next position of Secretary General? In a nutshell, because this is what you're here for as well. So can you tell us briefly why it should be, according to you, a woman next time?
Well, the first thing I will recommend is that you read an op-ed that Helen Clark, Irina Bokova, and I signed that was out a few weeks ago, in March, a couple of months ago, I should say, that the title is Not Any Person, Not Any Woman, Not Any Man. Because there, what we say essentially is that what is required is somebody that has a very, very unique profile, starting with the values that are required and the decision to really be at the helm of this institution in very, very challenging times. We believe that what is needed now is somebody who can bridge the divide. The divide is deeper than ever before, that can bridge that divide, that can present options that are to be analyzed by all parties and eventually come to solutions. Somebody who is ready to reach out and talk with everybody, and more importantly, listen to everybody. Somebody who is ready to be out there and speak on behalf of the United Nations, even in times where that might be risky, given the circumstances surrounding the issues that we face, that the UN faces, that the world faces. Those characteristics are not only women's characteristics. We recognize that, but we feel that women are more inclined to have those characteristics than men, that are ready to negotiate and to find solutions that sometimes are not in the original mix of expectations, but are more willing to go out of their way. And that's why we have always said that we felt that it was time for a woman. It's not a historic recognition, which is also, but it's the moment. Having said that, again, we have indicated that it should be a person that has those characteristics, and there can be the case that a man proves to have all those characteristics. It's it's interesting because when the conversation around women starts, people talk about merit, and it looks like there is no merit in having women. We feel that it should be merit-based, no question about it, and that's why we feel comfortable that women will meet the merit condition. Yes?
From Geneva Solutions. Having watched the interactive dialogues, I was wondering what you hope the debate will draw out that either perhaps dialogues didn't or will add to that in terms of substance. Because you mentioned obviously this will bring the candidates a much wider audience of people across Eurovision, but in terms of the substance that you'd like to see come out from this debate, I mean, also 60 minutes isn't very long, so how to distill that in 60 minutes?
Well, but that's the challenge, you know. I mean, when you said you watched the interactive dialogues, it took 12 hours of your life to watch that. I am not sure how many people, and my life too, how many people did that, except for the ones who are very close to the issues and very interested in the matter. This needs to boil down to clear messages that will have to work on all pillars of what the UN does. But what I think is most important, and it was the case when we did it last time, is to see all candidates together. Because it's different to see candidates performing one by the other than to see each one of them individually within the setting of it was the ECOSOC, I think it was ECOSOC or the trusteeship. You know, it's a very different setting to have your colleagues sitting around you listening to your colleagues, what they say, because that also provides more natural reactions than just a very, very established and set dialogue with member states. It's a very different environment. And if you want to test that, I suggest that you go to YouTube. You don't have to watch the whole debates, but yes, just watch a little bit and you will see how there is a different dynamic. And that's why we feel it's so important to expose that to the world. Yes?
Sorry, Tiki Modikoso. I'm a journalist. I'm wondering how will be the impact of the debate to the vote on the election, knowing that it's not ordinary people who are going to vote, like a presidential election in the country. And do you have any lobby or do you start any advocacy work behind the states because the representatives of states are going to vote? And how do you feel are they positive to imagine a woman as a SG? Because at the end of the day, it's the member state and the representative who are going to the police station to vote.
Well, you are totally right. And in fact, if you recall in 2016, it was the 147 billion campaign, and it was without any question going to be a woman. And it was not for the lack of women. We were 7. And the lack of different profiles of women. We were very different profiles that ran at the time, and in the end, none of us were up to the task. So you are totally right. We don't have the power to take the decision. In fact, you mentioned member states. I would argue that a few member states have the real power to decide, because the veto power of the P5 is a clear go, no go to any of the candidates. And I will extend that to the non-permanent members of the Security Council, because in the end, you need at least 9 votes to be able to qualify for the position. So that the non-permanent members do have a power of not voting if they don't feel comfortable. That is behind closed doors, and that's exactly the way it was in 2016 and the way it's going to be in 2026. So there is a limit to what you can do. But I think that for the UN, which is in such a difficult position vis-a-vis the trust of the peoples, to show who are the candidates and what do they think and how do they think about it is important. I don't believe that this is going to change dramatically the way the member states, the ones who are involved, will view the results, as I believe that the interactive dialogues that took place 2 weeks ago will not make that difference in the thinking of the P5 or the E10. But it is important to show how the candidates think, what do they think, how do they place their priorities, because you also need to measure that later when one of them will be Secretary General, so you can compare what the commitments were made and how they perform. So we believe that we are going to move the needle to a level that will really ensure that a certain profile will be chosen. No, I don't believe that. We advocate for a transparent process, a process that gets the best out of the decision. Yes?
Thank you, Olivia from Reuters. Thank you very much for this. I have a couple of questions, if I may. I mean, how likely do you think it is that we'll have more candidates, and are you hearing anything in the corridors on WhatsApp groups on potential candidates who might be coming forward? That's question one, and if I may, just a second question. I'm just curious as to why you think there has been, up until now, no women SG. Is that a systemic problem? And in the current environment with Trump, obviously US one of the P5, does that make the kind of possibility therefore even harder, the fact that this race is taking place this year under that administration?
Well, first, on more candidates, I think there are more candidates in the pipeline. I won't give names, so don't even ask for that. But I think there are at least 2 or 3 more people who are considering this very seriously. It's not an easy decision. You need to have a member state supporting you, yours or any other. You need to have the financial support to make this happen, and you need to declare that financial support where it's coming from. So there are a few things that you need to put together, but I do hear a couple of potential candidates coming our way. So I believe that we might have more candidates by June the 9th. I might be proven wrong, but that's my sense. As per what are the options, the first thing, I haven't heard from any of the P5 an indication that they will not want to have a woman. That I have not heard. In fact, I'm sure you have seen what the Chinese permanent representative said a couple of days ago, last week, when he started the presidency of the Security Council. He said clearly that China will not mind at all having a woman Secretary General. When I see President Trump, his chief of staff is a woman. So I don't think there is a structured reason for any of the P5 to be against. Of course, all of them then qualify the right person, the right profile, the merit, all the rest of the things, which in my view apply to any of the candidates. So we are not giving up at all. We think that there is an opportunity, and if there are strong candidates, and I think there are strong candidates and strong potential candidates, I think that will be considered as part of a review of all candidates.
And sorry, just a question, and thank you for those points on why you think up until now.
Oh, sorry, I forgot that. Well, the UN is not different from the rest of the world regarding power. Power has been concentrated in men, in all spheres of business, private, public. Look at how many presidents, prime ministers have been women. Look at how many representatives before the General Assembly or before Geneva or Vienna. So that is exactly the same. It's the power structure that has been historically geared towards men and handled and managed by men. I think that it is clear that there are more and more options to decide differently. And even if you decide for a man, to have the opportunity to consider women that are at the same level and can compete. So if I were to tell you how I felt in 2016, I felt frustrated, no doubt about it, having been a candidate. Not so much about me not being selected, about the fact that not one of the 7 women were up to it. That really was frustrating. But on the other hand, when you look at the process, women stood up and made their case, and that in itself is valuable. And that's why it's so important to showcase all candidates together, so that you can compare. And in the end, you come to the conclusion that it's not about being a man or a woman, it's about having the substantive conditions that make you a potential Secretary General. Yes?
Yeah, Imogen from BBC. This is very hypothetical, but just jump ahead, say we do get a General.
Mhm.
Now, right now, and increasingly, the UN is completely sidelined in its key missions, conflict resolution, conflict prevention. And it's being sidelined by the very same powerful countries who say, look, the UN's not doing its job. I mean, if those conditions stay the same, you talked about substantive conditions, I just worry this whole thing could backfire on women. People could just say, oh look, she's not doing her job. She isn't doing her job. Does that not concern you at all?
Of course.
It's maybe not the right moment.
Well, I have heard that question quite a few times. And I just feel that if we are looking for the right moment, we probably never get there. It's very common, and this is very common in the private sector, that a women get the job when the situation is such that it's sort of hopeless, you know, how do they call it, the crystal cliff? That's how they call it. It's not only the crystal ceiling, it's the crystal cliff. I believe, and honestly believe, that whoever gets the position, man or woman, is going to face a very, very delicate situation, both internally, in terms of the functioning of the organization, but also externally, given the constraints that the UN is facing. My sense is that you need somebody, and that's why I said, ready to be there where the issues are, and, you know, just show the UN where it's needed, tell openly what is needed, but also tell behind the scene what are the options, and maybe, you know, the UN is able to bring options to the table that others don't even think about. When you look at the history of the UN, there were other moments where things seemed to be absolutely hopeless. And, you know, the crisis between the US and Russia on Cuba is a good example. And it was the Secretary General quietly that provided options, and not the first one did not work and came back with the second one, and at least kept the channel open between President Khrushchev and President Kennedy, and in the end arrived for a solution. So I think that's the role the UN needs to play. And my sense is that we should have a Secretary General ready to do that and able to do that. And often to do that, you need to be not at the fore necessarily. You have to open back channels of communication. Women tend to be very good at opening back channels of communication. I will argue that's where we strive. I'm not suggesting it's easy, but it's not easy for anyone. So if it's not easy, we are not going to give up. Yes?
I have a comment. It's very frustrating to see that the UN are promoting gender, women, and all this matter of equality. But at least since the creation of the organization, we never have an SG who is a woman. And for me, ethically speaking, we should not give them a choice this time or next time. Because they cannot ask people to continue to promote women everywhere, but the organization itself will not give the example. That's why I'm here today. Because I realize that it's a very long trick that we did not even realize sometimes that there are not women as SG. So I think that we are late at the moment if they did not change the position. But next time, this should involve women from all over the world to push to have a woman SG. We did it in African Union when we had Madame Zuma. We did not give them a choice. Everything changed 24 hours before the elections. And it was women who were behind, pushing, calling head of state, explaining that this time is for women. Because it's very sad. There is no reason, you know. The second point is the perception that the world population has seen to the UN. Are people still believing to the UN? Or some people, even particularly the young generation, they need somebody who can convince people to continue to believe the role of the UN or what they are doing. It's not just a matter of head of state, minister, and all this. You have the beneficiary, you have people who don't even understand what the UN is doing. How do you plan in terms of women or not the future of the UN if people feel very far of what is going on in New York and Geneva?
Well, you make very valid points. Let me start about the trust question, which is in the end what is underlying all these processes. I think we have a problem of trust in institutions, not only in the UN, in institutions at large. And it's clear that democracy is under siege because people don't trust the most basic institutions of democracy. And democracy and the UN are intertwined, you know? I mean, if people don't trust their own governments or their own governmental institutions, it's even harder to trust an institution that is above and is more distant. So I think we are facing a moment where the citizens of the world, the peoples of the world, feel that whoever has to deliver for them is not delivering well enough, good enough. And that is a big problem. It's a big problem because many are taking advantage of that and are sending messages of easy solutions to complex situations. And I believe that is something that needs to be understood. My sense is that having the right leadership at the UN in itself will change the dynamics. And having the right leadership there will make all of a sudden the attention shift from where it is. And I believe that is very important, you know, and that's why we believe that a woman will make a difference, because I'm sure that the press, for example, if there were to be a woman at the helm of the United Nations, will immediately seek to meet with that person and seek her views and seek her opinions in a manner different from the traditional way, because it's a woman. I also believe that girls and young women in the world will all of a sudden feel represented in a manner that has not been the case before. But if member states, if the P5 decide to choose a man, which is absolutely possible, we need to have somebody there who also is able to rejuvenate, re-energize, bring something to the table that adds hope and is concrete. And to me, that has to do with being there where the problems are, which to a certain extent has not happened recently. You know, if the problem is in Gaza, well, be there from the very first day. And be there trying to provide options of solutions, openings. You know, if there is no space for a ceasefire, then open up the humanitarian space. Make sure that you raise the case for the humanitarian space. Those are the things that need to be done. Not to speak about, of course, preempting the problem and trying to propose solutions before the problem breaks, you know, which is, again, something that, in my view, is a very, very well-established characteristic of women, you know, trying to avoid the problem before it happens. So there is no magic wand to what you are asking. No way. Because the other thing, and I go back to your point, which I believe there is another element to your point. We cannot assume that whoever becomes the next Secretary General on his or her own will be able to solve all problems. What is necessary is to build a strong team around her or him. And in order to do that, the person needs to be willing to work with others, which is not always the case. Sometimes leaders feel that they have all the answers to all the questions. Humility is part of what is needed in order to build strong teams. And I think that that's something that will have to be at the fore, because otherwise it's not going to be, the issues will not be addressed. There are so many issues in so many different places that you need to build that. I worked very closely with Madame Zuma when she was at the African Union, so I know how she did it. It's just, the reality is that the system in the UN works differently to get somebody to the last position, the most important position.
So what about, I realize that of course there is not an SG, a woman SG, but there are many women in the UN system who has some position. We had Carol Bellamy, UNICEF, we have, and after that they create UN Women, like, okay, you have your organization, don't worry us. Do you imagine a man being the head of the UN Women on Monday?
Well, I think that could be the case, absolutely.
Because
Eventually.
African women, you know.
Eventually, that could be the case. Yeah, you know, that's when you think about the issues. Eventually, first of all, we will love to get rid of young women because the issues are not there any longer. But you know, having a man that champions the issues of women could be the case. Why not? I wouldn't go against that. I don't know who will volunteer. That's another story. But I don't see why not. Yeah. Is the question of gender is works both ways, and one needs to recognize that. But in the end, what we are trying to do here is make sure that the process is as strong as possible, that is as open as possible, recognizing that at a certain point the decision will be taken behind closed doors, but to expose the process to the peoples of the world in a manner that people understand that there is an opportunity. That's what we see. We see an opportunity here. And we see an opportunity where member states will have to make a decision, and we hope they'll make the best decision based on the options they have before them. That's how we see our job. I hope that you as journalists will convey this to the world too, and we will keep working. Yes?
Just on a practical, I know you said you're confident that they'll all attend, but I think you mentioned that perhaps 3 have already confirmed. So has that increased? Have you?
Well, we are working with all of them.
And have you had any further engagement with the UN General Assembly presidents?
Well, we have spoken with the PGA. Yeah, we have spoken. We have told her what we are doing. And in fact, there is another element that is new. We are going to have another debate in Jeju, in Korea, in the Republic of Korea. They have come to suggest that we should partner to do something that is more focused on Asia. And we found that to be a very interesting proposition, so we are helping them. There is a Jeju Forum, you might have heard of it. There is a Jeju Forum that takes place towards the end of June 24, 25, 26, I think are the dates. And they are planning to have a debate on the 25th, and we are helping them and using our experience in putting this together to make sure that there is a successful a debate there too, and they are also engaging with the candidates. So the objective here is to expose the candidates as much as possible, because the more you listen to them, you hear them, you see them together, the better you can get an opinion that is balanced.
Of the 2 to 3 candidates who might be running, are any of you said there might be some more candidates, I know you can't say who, but are any of them women, do you think?
Well, some of them are women, yeah.
Some are women,
Yeah. Yeah.
Note with interest.
I cannot speak about names because you cannot second guess what they're going to do. You cannot expose anybody if they haven't taken the decision.
Yeah.
But I know there are people seriously considering this.
And do you have an impression that so far there's a feeling of a front runner, without naming who that front runner might be, but do you get a sense that maybe there's the momentum gathering around?
I don't, out of the interactive dialogue, I didn't get a sense of a front runner, a single person that is a front runner. I didn't get that sense, but that's my impression. Others might think differently.
This might really strange, but there's quite a few Western diplomats in Geneva who suggested to me that Ivanka Trump might put her name in at the last minute. Is this just a bad joke?
Well, I don't know. I cannot second guess anybody. There is established principle, or there has been, let me rephrase that, there has been established principle that none of the P5 will go for the position of the Secretary General for obvious reasons. I mean, there is enough power residing on the P5 to also have the Secretary General position. This has been the historic view and the historic decisions. That's as far as I can go. I have no clue that that might be the case.
What about the town by region?
Mm-hmm.
Because of course everybody can apply the situation, but in the UN system they have at AFTA, for example, an European, it would be somebody from Latin America or Asia, or is it this will continue to be respect, or it's just everything now they can choose in one that they considering the how we call it, the term of region by region?
Well, the geographic rotation is not established as a must for the position of the Secretary General.
Okay.
So
It's just a
it has been a
practice.
practice. It has been a practice. And it's a practice that people see with interest because there are other things that trickle down from that practice, you know. And I have spoken with some leaders from Africa, for example, who have told me that they feel very strongly that they want to protect the geographic rotation because it's in the interest of Africa and other regions to do so. Clearly, last time it was the theoretical term for Eastern Europe and it didn't materialize. And some argue that has already been broken. Others argue that the notion of Eastern Europe with the creation of the European Union and after the fall of the Berlin Wall has sort of gotten blurred. So some argue it's not exactly the same case. I'm just repeating here, I'm not taking turns. So when you look at the different regions, the only region that has not had two Secretary Generals is Latin America. So it's clearly Latin America and the Caribbean, the region that has more in that regard, in the regard of the geographic rotation.
After Xavier Perez de Cuellar?
Say that again, please.
After Xavier Perez de Cuellar?
Perez de Cuellar, yeah. Perez de Cuellar is the only Secretary General that has come from Latin America. All other regions, well, Europe has had more than two, but all other regions have had at least two. So from that regard, it seems like a natural choice to have somebody from Latin America and the Caribbean. When you listen to some of the members of the Security Council, some of the P5, they have indicated that they want the best candidate from anywhere in the world where they can find him or her. So they haven't said clearly, we want this to come from a certain particular region. So we shall see.
Now, what about, for example, the intergeneration profile and women who have never, for example, worked in the UN or who have never been minister in their country? I know that is the state to represent candidate, but is it possible to have a woman from a business company who is 45 or 50 years old to be supporting or represented by this government? Because we see the same people coming and go, you know, all of the election in the UN, I'm sorry to say that. But you have the impression that the profile is designed to be a former minister of foreign affairs or a former even president, some president, former president are candidate even, or a former UN staff like Kofi Annan was, you know. We probably even need somebody completely out of the system today.
Well, but that's for member states to decide. I mean, there is nothing that precludes a member state to say, ask a head of a CEO of a large company to be the candidate. There is nothing that precludes that, but it's a member state who has to take the decision. You know, when I ran, I have 25 years in the private sector. I was CEO of the third largest company in my country, so I hit that element. It wasn't taken into account, I think, and it wasn't considered. But if a member state decides to bring to the fore a CEO, I don't see any reason why that person, he or she will not be considered.
Do you think there's, or could you comment a little bit about the tension that you see, or do you see, between what the public want to hear from a potential Secretary General and what the P5 and P10 are looking forward to hear? And having been in that position yourself at your campaigning decision, what message you put forward? Because I think there is a kind of clear discrepancy between what people would like to see the SG represent in terms of values, but that's not necessarily being the reality of what the P5 will go to and will vote for, especially when it comes to having an SG that's more outspoken on certain issues that would count against them if potentially if they have come with too much political baggage. So, I mean, that kind of also puts them in a little bit of a bind.
You know, I think the biggest challenge a Secretary General has, man or woman, is the balance between being a secretary and being a general. How do you hit that balance right is the challenge. You cannot assume that you're going to be the general 100% of the time. You have to decide which are the moments in which you take a position of a general. And I don't know whether that is 80-20, 90-10. I cannot say that. I mean, I'm just guessing here. But it's clear that there are moments where you need to find a way to become a strong voice. Sometimes, again, that strong voice doesn't have to come out to the public. You know, you can have it behind the scene. And, you know, Yutan, when he did what he did between Khrushchev and Kennedy, didn't do it out in the fore. He did it behind the scene. But he was able to achieve the objective. So what you said, in my view, is clear. It has to be guided by what the Charter says. And, you know, there is no way out of that. How you say it is how you manage this balance of being soft and nuanced in certain moments because you are the secretary, but being very, very strong and principled in others. That, to me, is the way to handle that dichotomy that you were referring to. And it's a dichotomy that not only refers to the public, to the peoples, it also refers to member states. You know, one thing is what the P5 feel, another one is what the rest feel. It's 188 member states that have a different view. And that's why it's also important the role of the General Assembly, you know, because in the end, this decision must be voted by the General Assembly, you know, must be approved by the General Assembly. So there is a role there for the General Assembly. Okay, I guess you either you run out of questions or you don't want to listen to me anymore, whichever way this goes. I again thank you for coming. We will continue to make the case, and we hope that this debate will be successful here in Geneva, and then we'll take it to Korea with our friends in Jeju.
Will there be a separate press conference?
Say that again?
Will there be a press conference on the day?
We are working with the candidates so that they avail themselves. That's part of the choreography that we are sorting out with them, so that there will be sort of a press takeout after. That's part of what we are discussing with them. We need to make sure. Remember that this is a voluntary thing that they are making, so we need to recognize that and make sure that they feel comfortable.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
It's basically the same question that I asked, but I need to be on the mic or writing.
I just want to mention one point because we had already several times issues with ED when you broadcasting. There's always a question of rights to pay and that kind of stuff.
Well, theoretically, that is addressed in our agreement, but I will look into that. Thanks for telling me.
Just to be sure that's going to be
Thanks
fully
for telling me.
available for everyone and for free.
Thanks for telling me, because that was exactly the